Hey everyone, this is Cal and I'm from Selah Effects and I'm going to talk to you about our Quartz Timer V2. I'm going to try and explain what it is, what it isn't, and after I explain that and everyone can get a good understanding on it, we can move into some other videos where we'll show you how to do exactly what I've talked about in this video. So, the Quartz is an advanced controller. It does not produce any sound. So if you're expecting it to produce a click track, like an actual audible click, it will not do that. There's a metronome symbol here, and that symbolizes a metronome input and not an output. That's this little guy. So it's a little 1/8 inch jack. So there's a lot of things that the Quartz can do. And it's basically a controller to control every aspect of your pedal board. Now you notice there's a few different jacks and things going on here. You've got 4 TRS jacks, you've got an 1/8 inch, you've got a USB, you've got MIDI in and MIDI out. And there's a couple knobs and a foot switch. So, what can the Quartz do? A lot of you might think it's just a tap tempo pedal, so plugging into, standard tap input on your pedal, and you'd be right, it can do that. But there's a little bit more going on than that. So if you just want to tap tempo, you could do this. Like for pedals that don't have MIDI, they'll often have a little expression/tap input, and you plug a foot switch into it and you can tap away on that and the timing will be set. Instead of having to turn a knob and you don't actually know what tempo that is, if you can tap in a tempo, it's a lot easier. So you could just tap in the tempo for every song as when it starts, and then you know that you're in the ballpark anyway. The thing is, they're not very accurate because we all might think that we can tap fairly accurately, but you'll always be a little bit out. So why would you buy a Quartz if you wanted to do that? And it's a good question because this situation is exactly the same as this. Coming out of this output here, this jack number 1 going into here is exactly the same as doing this. You would tap on this foot switch and it would set the time on the delay. Same as tapping the foot switch here, and you would set the time there as well. But what if you had multiple delays? You would have to have possibly 4 of these, and you'd have to tap on each one to set the time on each one. With the Quartz, you can tap this one foot switch here, and all of these pedals will be synced to the same BPM, whatever you've tapped. So that's great. So, but you might be thinking, well, I could just make a box, and the box could have a foot switch, and it could have 4 outputs on it, and the foot switch is connected directly to the jacks, and they all go out here, and they all send out at the same time. And you could just tap here once, and it'll be set everywhere. And you could do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people do that, so that is an option. But what if your pedal needed a different polarity? See, for Boss pedals, they like to have normally closed, which means that the output is latched by default, and then when you press the foot switch, it unlatches. Whereas an El Cap needs a different polarity. So there's some pedals that need normally open, which is most pedals need normally open, which means that the output is open, unlatched, and then when you press the foot switch, it latches until you release the foot switch and it's released. And then there's some other pedals that need a combination of the two. So sometimes on a TRS jack, you've got 3 connection points, and connecting them in different ways is needed for some pedals, like the strum on timeline or the dig. So what would you do in that situation? If you made a little box like this, you would have to make each output hardwired as one or the other. So you can't have normally open or normally closed if you're wiring it straight from the jack to the foot switch. And it's very hard to get a different sort of configuration for other pedals. The other thing is, when you tap on this, you'll most likely be tapping in quarter notes to the song, which means that all of these pedals will be set to quarter notes. That's whatever you tap there is the division that they will get. You can't change this one to be eighth notes and this one to be quarter, this one to be dotted eighth, this one to be another. You can do that if the pedal actually supports it on board. So you could twiddle a knob here, and when you tap quarter notes there, it could change to eighth notes on the pedal, but that's relying on the pedal. And a lot of pedals only have a few choices when it comes to divisions. The other thing is, once you've set that on the pedal, you are stuck with it a lot of times. If the pedal doesn't have a preset system, and you wouldn't be able to recall a preset anyway in this situation, you'd have to have another box, then you need another solution. So this is where the Quartz is handy if you just wanted to use it kind of as a tap tempo sort of a pedal. So this output here could be quarter notes. It can be normally closed for boss pedals. You can choose how many times it pulses. So with this, a pulse sort of means how many times it gets tapped. So with this, if you tap 4 times, this will receive 4 taps, this will receive 4 taps. They'll all receive 4 taps. But you can actually set each output on the Quartz to be a different number of taps or pulses. But yeah, so each output can be configured on the pedal itself. You won't have to open the back up. You just go into the menu system, choose what you want, and it's all good. Now, we come into some interesting things. Each of these outputs can also be latched forever, which means it's like holding down the foot switch forever. So on the L cap and the flint, you can recall favorites. For when I tap this foot switch and I'm on here, this L cap can recall a certain preset that you've saved, and at the same time recall this one or not recall it, and at the same time setting the BPM data for the other pedals. So the Quartz actually has 12 divisions on it available. We're adding more all the time. If we get suggestions, we can add more. So that's the beauty of firmware updates. So the benefit is, you can see the benefits there, but we'd also want to be able to organize things a bit better. You don't want to have to be tapping in every time a song starts to change the tempo. And that's where presets come in. So here you go. A song or a preset has a few different things saved with it. Quite a lot of things actually, but when it's being displayed, you've got a song name, which is 30 characters. You can add the line breaks and choose the font size. You can choose the tempo and save it as a preset, so that now I don't need to tap in every time. When a song starts, I can just save it as a preset whenever I recall the preset, either with a knob or with the foot switch or with another pedal that's plugged into it, which we'll get into later. Then the tempo will be recalled and sent out automatically. You don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is choose what this foot switch does, and you can do that. So that could still be a tap tempo if you want, or it could be going to the next preset. So the foot switch actually has 2 actions at a time. You can tap it and that will do something, and when you hold it down for a second, it'll do something else. So by default, the functions are tap tempo for the tap and going to the next preset when you hold it down. And this allows you to never worry about different modes and things. You're always using the pedal in live mode, which is just completely configurable. You can decide what everything does, and we'll get into that later too. So for this first song, a song name, I might set my flint to not recall its favorite, and it'll get the data from the knobs, but it will set the tempo to 120. And then on the L cap over here, I decide actually I will recall the favorite on this one. And then on the digital delay up here, it'll be eighth notes, and it'll be 120 BPM as well. And that one over there will be quarter notes at 120 BPM as well. So all of it's done automatically for you. You don't have to worry about it. And if the Quartz receives a new BPM from somewhere else, which it can do, it will update automatically, and you don't have to even worry about touching the quartz. It'll receive the BPM, convert it into tap signals, and you're good to go. And you can change the color of the screen. So each preset can have a different color. Makes it quick to see what you're doing and where you're going. But this is kind of if you wanted to just use it as its standard sort of tap output sort of a thing. So a lot of people get scared with MIDI, and this is why. Because there's a lot going on. But don't be scared. It's all quite simple. So the Quartz can sync, it can send out MIDI as well. So, and this is its little MIDI jack on the side here. It goes out of the Quartz into a pedal, out of that pedal into another pedal, and so on. Normally, this is the way it happens. You chain pedals together so that MIDI through happens. You send a message, and it will pass all of the messages on to the next pedal. And each pedal is on a different channel, normally on a different channel. That's how it works. And you then can talk to just one pedal. So if I just wanted to talk to the H9, I'd send out a message on a certain channel, and it's receiving on a channel, and it will listen to those messages. All these other pedals that are receiving MIDI as well, they receive the messages, but they don't listen to it. They don't change anything because they're not on the same channel that the H9's on. Now, the Quartz isn't a basic MIDI controller. It's quite advanced in that it can send anything you like. So it can be on any channel. It can be any type of MIDI message. And don't get overwhelmed by that. It's just, you just need to look up what message you need to send and tell the Quartz to send it. That's basically it. If you want to turn this knob here, you can do that. You just have to find out what message it needs for you to send and just tell the Quartz to send it, and you're all good. So for this song, it's 120 BPM. Once again, I've got these tap input pedals here that are getting synced to 120 BPM at different divisions. I'm also recalling a preset over here on the L cap, if you remember that, if I remember that actually. And up here, I can recall a preset on the flashback. I can recall a preset here. I can not recall a preset here, and I can just tell this one to listen to the BPM. And same deal. I can do absolutely anything that the pedals up here allow me to. So if you're wondering if the Quartz can do something, normally it comes down to what the other pedals can receive. Because like I said, you can send any message you like from the Quartz. And there are multiple messages at once. So it will send out the BPM data via MIDI. It will send out the BPM data via tap outputs. And it will send out any messages that you need to send along with the MIDI clock. So it's not going to be interfering with anything. MIDI clock will set this BPM here and also change the preset on the timeline. So another thing that the Quartz can do is you might have a looper or a controller that can only send out a certain message, like a MIDI message. A lot of times controllers will only send out on one channel, or they'll only send out one message on one channel. So like normally it's a program change and it's just set to whatever it is. If you're on preset 35, it's going to send out program change 35 on channel 1, and that's it. So in that case, this sort of situation is not going to work because you might want all of your pedals to change to a different preset. You might want the flashback to be on preset 1. You might want this one to be on preset 35. The other thing is pedals have a different number of presets. Like the flashback's only a few presets, I think. Timeline's got quite a few, and the others, I'm not sure about the dream sequence. But yeah, different numbers of presets. So when I send out program change 3, or when I send out program change 23, then that's going to be useless for the flashback if it only has 3 presets. So what do? You get a Quartz. And when the controller sends out a message that it just sends out one single message here. So say it's sending out program change number 3. The Quartz would then receive it, and it could pass it on if you wanted it to, or you could actually block the message from passing through. And the powerful thing is you can then map that to 11 other messages if you want, which means that you can control up to 11 other pedals from the one message that you've received here. And they can all do completely different things. They don't have to be a program change, meaning you don't have to change a preset on these things. You can change a knob, because with MIDI, you can, once again, depending on what the pedal allows you to do, you can change a parameter on the pedal without changing presets. So you might really like your preset on your timeline, but you just want, for one part of the song, you want to turn up the repeats on just a certain part of the song. You'd send a message from here, and you would make it happen. Or you can just you can basically just create that message and send it to the pedal. And you don't have to make another preset on the timeline. It's just a modification of that preset. So with MIDI, it's almost unlimited with what you can do if you spend the time to read about what your pedals are capable of. Study the manuals of each of your pedals, and you'll find that you'll be surprised at what you can actually do with them. But once again, you need a controller that can unlock that sort of thing. And the Quartz is one of those controllers that can do that. The other good thing is, like you can see here, there's no BPM readout on some pedals. So it's nice to see the BPM that you're tapping in, or not tapping in, receiving messages from a controller or changing a preset. So that's MIDI conversion. Now we get into some other stuff. The outputs here can also be inputs. Not output 4, that's always an output. But these three here can be inputs as well. You plug foot switches into them. So just like I've shown here. Now I mentioned before that the onboard foot switch, you could choose what it does. And you can choose what it does when you tap it and when you hold it. So what I haven't shown here is some functions for these two foot switches, but you get the idea. When you are using the Quartz normally, all of the functionality is there, but sometimes you just need a little extra control. So you could actually, if I go back, when I press the foot switch on the pedal here, I can actually bank up on the timeline if I wanted to. Whenever I recall a preset, I send out a stack of MIDI messages, and these MIDI messages can bank up on the timeline and do all sorts of things already. So the functionality is already there within the Quartz. It's just being able to control it and activate that in different ways. And that's where these foot switches come in handy, because I can bank up on my timeline when I tap this foot switch, and when I tap that foot switch, I can bank down on the timeline. And it's all independent of the preset. It can be dependent on the preset too. So globally, I could set this up so that the timeline, this foot switch here is always banking up on my timeline, and this one's always banking down. Then when I hold the foot switch, I'll engage the timeline, and when I hold this foot switch, I'll bypass the timeline. And that's the power of these extra foot switches. You can access the MIDI messages in here, and they are independent of the preset messages. So once you recall a preset, that'll send out a lot of messages. Then while you're on the preset, you can send out all these extra messages. Not only that, but you can do certain functions on the pedal, like tap tempo. So this is actually a Quartz function. So when you're tapping this, it's setting the BPM here. You could have all of these foot switches set up to be tap tempo if you wanted to, but that would be completely useless. Not only that, but when you could actually, don't have it shown here, but you can use one of these foot switches to go to a certain Quartz preset, and that will recall a preset. and you can go back again. So a song name here, this song, could take me to, if I press this button, it could take me to the 37th preset. And then when I press it again, it'll take me back to here. So that's really handy for treating the songs as banks. So you can have, chorus, verse, bridge, and all that sort of thing within the one song. So let's see what we can do. So at the moment, I've got these, I've already gone through this one, and this one's the same, except it's for the echo system. Now, when I press this foot switch, the echo system's not going to be affected at all. When I press this foot switch, I'll be banking down on the echo system, banking up here, engaging and bypassing. So this is the very powerful thing that you can do. Not only can you do what is shown here, but when I bank down on my timeline, I could also bank down on my echo system with one tap. So normally what you would do is you would buy a bank up and bank down foot switch thing and plug that into your timeline. Then you would buy a bank up, bank down ecosystem thing and you'd plug that into your ecosystem. And then when you tap each one, you would go up and down on both of them, on either of them, but not both of them at the same time because they're separate foot switches. With the Quartz, you can do all of it at once. So this lot of text here could just as easily move over here underneath this one. And when you tap that foot switch, you'll bank down on the timeline and you'll also bank down on the ecosystem with one tap. Then when you hold it, you could bypass the timeline and bypass the ecosystem if you were to move that one over to there. I've just shown it like this to separate it up a little bit, but that goes to show how much you can do with just a few foot switches. Because you remember, you've still got this foot switch up here that can do exactly the same thing. So this one can do anything that this one can do. So there's other functions that you can do, like starting, stopping MIDI clock. There's probably 10 or so functions to choose from. But that's the Quartz functions, like things like tap tempo, next preset of the Quartz, starting and stopping MIDI clock on the Quartz, starting and stopping the metronome input, as you can see. So that's Quartz functions. Then you've got MIDI stacks that get sent out, and that's can be specific things for specific pedals, or it can be global things for all of your pedals, or it can be anything you want. So this foot switch here could be bypass all of your pedals, and this one here could be engage all of your pedals with one tap. Then the other really powerful thing is you can do it per preset. So all of this stuff here can change when you go to a different song, like this. So I'm on this third song over here, and as you'll notice, all of the functions are different. And there's 128 presets, so each one of these foot switches can change 128 times. And each foot switch has two actions that can happen, a tapping action and a holding action. But like I said, the onboard foot switch is the same deal. You don't need any of these. You can actually change. This could be a tap tempo on this song, and then over this on this song, it could be your next preset button, or whatever you want. You'd probably never do that, but you can do any of this stuff on the onboard foot switch as well. So the songs can also send out MIDI messages, like I mentioned. So you got song MIDI messages, you got foot switch MIDI messages as well. And then you got foot switch functions and presets and all that. So if you wanted to bank up on the timeline when you go to a certain preset, you can actually do that. You don't need a foot switch to do it. When you go to the third song, it could be banking up on the timeline. Or when you go to the third song, it could set it to a specific bank. Remember that all of this is happening at the same time as setting your BPM and your tap outputs. So if you only have one extra foot switch plugged in here, these three can still be outputting tap signals to your other pedals, and it can also be a favorite signal for certain pedals. So with MIDI as well, you can actually use that in your DAW like so. That's a bit fuzzy, but that's Ableton Live. So the Quartz has a standard 5-pin MIDI socket, so you'd need to go into some sort of interface and then into your computer. And then once you're in there, you can map your MIDI messages. There's like a MIDI map thing here, and it could be mapped to this little tap. There's a tap button in Ableton, and when you tap this foot switch, it could send a message and tap the tempo here. Or you can just set MIDI clock as well. That's another way of syncing. So your MIDI clock would be constantly running to Ableton. Everything's getting synced up, and then it's sending out whatever its sounds that you need to. You can also control the Quartz with the software, so you can send out program changes. For a certain clip, you could set the Quartz to a certain sound, and that will sync up all of your pedals to that sound. You can also send BPM from Ableton to, and lots of other DAWs to the Quartz, and it'll all be in time with whatever you're playing. The other thing you can do with the Quartz is this metronome input, and so a powerful way to use that would be to send a click, an actual audio click from your DAW or a metronome, and into this little input here, and that would convert the click sound into a BPM, and that BPM is then sent out via MIDI, and like I've already shown you all the other ways. And that's a good way to do it, because then you don't need this thing. You could just plug a standard, auxiliary 1/8" lead into your computer and straight into the Quartz, and it's receiving its BPM data. You won't be able to send any other messages via MIDI because there's no MIDI plugged in, but you can set the time. A lot of time that's okay if you have your song set up so that each song is sending out the MIDI data anyway, then receiving just the tempo could be fine. And then you just press a button on your Quartz to activate whatever sound that you need. So let's talk about a set list. The Quartz has 128 songs, sounds, or presets, and that means that would be a huge pain to scroll through them all live. You wouldn't ever want to do that. So each song can be assigned a place in a set list. Now, Quartz has one set list, and the idea is that you edit your set list for that day that you're playing, and then the next day you edit it again, and you don't save multiple set lists. You can save multiple set lists with a computer, and I'll get to that soon. But this is basically it. You can add them in any order to your set list, and then when you're in live mode, you just scroll through them with your foot or with the knob or with another MIDI controller. Like when I press a button here, it would recall a song in my set list, and I wouldn't even have to touch the Quartz. It'd just be the song that I need in the set list. But a lot of times, if you are using another MIDI controller, you might not use the set list feature on the Quartz, because you're basically limiting how many presets you can recall with the MIDI controller. So let's go back down here. So you can also add songs more than once. As you can see here, song 9's in here twice, and they can be anywhere you want. And the benefit of this is, well, one of them is that song 9 could be called chorus, and song 3 could be called verse, and song 27 could be called bridge. So when you're on the verse, you press next and you go to the chorus. You press next again, you go to the bridge. You press next again, you go back to the chorus. So that's one way you can set up the set list. Another good way of doing that is with these foot switches. When you are on this song here and you press this button, that could be your verse, this could be your chorus, that could be your bridge, etc., etc. And that way your bridges and things are all ready there, ready for you to go. And they'll send out all of your custom data that you've set up beforehand. And that's great. And then when you go to the next song, the third song here, all of these buttons here are no longer the bridges and choruses for this song. They are now the bridges and choruses for the new song. All right, and another powerful thing that the Quartz does, oh, my little arrow's been chopped off, is you can connect it straight to a computer with the USB socket over here. So the benefit of this is you can edit absolutely everything on the pedal on your computer. So if you want to change that song name there, you just type it in up here and it will appear over here. On the new software, you can press a little preview name button and it'll send the name over, and you can see what it looks like with its colors and all of the line breaks and everything. You can make it look exactly the way that you want it to, so that you can see it, what it's going to look like in a live situation. It's important to note that this USB does not support MIDI at this stage. So if you wanted to get MIDI from here into the computer, you would have to do this sort of a thing. But it is very handy for this sort of thing, because you got 128 songs, and trying to edit all of that on a pedal is a bit tricky, especially when you are talking about all of this. You need to keep track of, what is output 1 doing? What's output 2 doing? What's all of this MIDI stuff? Like, how am I setting all of this on my other pedals? And that's very overwhelming if you have to do it all on the pedal. So that's why we've included a piece of software that can edit everything, and you can save sessions. So it's a bit of a backup. A session contains like all of the information that's on the pedal is saved in a session. You can also preview MIDI, like a stack of MIDI messages. So if you got 10 MIDI messages on the computer, in the software, you can press a button and it'll preview the stack to all of your other pedals. So I suggest when you're using the software that you have your Quartz plugged into your pedal board still, so that you can see the effects that it has on your pedal board. So here's a few examples of setups. We've already talked about them. This is taken from the manual. I suggest you read the manual as well. This is a cool thing. If the Quartz can receive MIDI messages that are not the standard MIDI messages. And by that I mean, normally when you're receiving MIDI to change presets and things, you're receiving a program change. But in this case, the Quartz can actually receive a note message, and the note message can do anything can do a certain amount of things. So it could be a tap tempo. So if I press this little key up the top here, I might never use it on my keyboard. I could set this as tap tempo if I wanted to, or I could set it to next preset on the Quartz. There's certain messages that the Quartz can receive and do something when it receives them. And those messages can be control changes, note changes, channel pressure, can be a lot of things. So here's a little Quartz expander. That's the interface I've already showed. So you can kind of create these MIDI loops as well. This will be fine because you tell the Quartz what to listen to and what not to listen to. So coming out of here, it's sending all of this data. It's actually getting passed all the way around and getting back to the Quartz again. But the Quartz doesn't care because it's not listening to the data that it's sending, because you tell it not to listen to it. And another thing to note is that there's some pedals that need TRS MIDI, and at the moment we're in the process of offering a mod which will allow one of the outputs here to be TRS MIDI, so you can just plug straight into it. At the moment you can still plug into like an ecosystem to control the tap tempo, but that's only tempo, that's not MIDI. So that's a lot of stuff that we've just gone through, and you might be thinking, that's a lot of stuff that we've gone through. And what if you don't want all of those features? And I would say to that, you don't have to use all of the features. We've constantly added features as we've gone along, because we receive emails from people and they suggest something cool and we think that's cool and we add it in and it is cool, so we keep it. None of this has to get in the way of you using the Quartz the way that you need it to. As I've shown, it can sync up in a lot of different ways and it can do a lot of different things for different people. But if you just wanted to use it like this, go ahead. You don't have to use MIDI at all. It's whatever pedals you have is what you need the Quartz to sync to. And we've tried to make the Quartz so that it can sync to a various number of pedals. So if you do get overwhelmed, just send us an email and hopefully we can clear things up a bit for you. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, let us know. I've most likely missed something. So if you're wondering if the Quartz can do something, then just email us and we can tell you whether it can or not. And like I say, we're constantly listening to feedback. So if you do need a feature that isn't on the Quartz, just let us know and we'll probably add it. So, all right, we'll be doing other videos as well to explain how exactly to set everything up if you do want to do a certain setup. So keep an eye out for those videos too. All right, cheers, bye.